Okay, so we're done with questions for now, and let's continue with the sexual factor or sexual preferences of people with the image of a flower in their natural programs. Yep, we're talking about sex again, but I don't think that we discussed the sexual factor of plants in this group anyway, so this will be quite interesting. So, first of all, a flower is the reproductive structure found in flowering plants. Or in other words, it is an organ of sexual reproduction. The number of modern species of flowering plants on our planet is about 350,000. And in diameter, a flower can be from about 1 millimeter, which is about 1/25 of an inch, to almost 3 feet and about 24 pounds in some tropical forests. And the flowers, they are strikingly diverse in the detail of structure, color, and of course sizes, as I already mentioned. So as for the sexual factor of people with the image of a flower and their individual programs, for example, a woman's vagina is comparable to a sensitive orchid. And as we know from biology, in nature, flowers, they're pollinated mostly by insects and by birds. So in order for a woman flower to attract attention of pollinators or men, her vagina should smell good. And it's also possible to say with complete certainty that women who have the image of a flower in their natural programs, they like hairy men. This, of course, includes men with facial hair, like beards, mustache, and so on. Why? Well, because in nature, hairiness of pollinators helps the flower in the process of pollination. And in the case of women flowers, the tickling mustache, it helps to stimulate her vagina. Also, vaginal stimulation of women flowers, and of course, stimulation of fertility, it can be achieved by stimulating vagina with some thin and quite sharp-shaped object. For example, it can be a finger. Why? Well, because as we know from biology, in nature, many, actually, if not all, flower pollinators, they have thin, pointed beaks or proboscises. For example, think about bees or hummingbirds. So the same principle, it applies in cases of flowers in human form. Some plants with actually quite plain flowers, they're pollinated by wind. Trees that are pollinated by wind, they usually bloom in the spring before their leaves start to grow, because that would interfere with the transfer of pollen, of course. So since some flowers are pollinated by wind, when a man blows on a woman who has the image of a flower in her program, it excites her. And this especially works well if a man blows on her vagina, of course. What else can we say about sexual behavior of people who have the image of a flower in their natural programs? Well, for example, the state of sexual desire makes them quite insane to some extent. What does this mean? Well, as we know from encyclopedias of biology, flowers, they're forced to wait for their pollinators because some of the most beautiful natural creatures on this planet, that is flowers, they simply don't have feet. So flowers, they await their pollinators yearningly, and they bloom only for so long, for a very short period of time. So this means that the time window when flowers can be pollinated is very, very short. So perhaps this is why, on the one hand, people flowers, they seem to be waiting patiently for their pollinators. Or if we use the human language, they're waiting to meet their compatible sexual partners. But also, on the other hand, they can get quite nervous if this waiting period ends up being too long. But of course, the main feeling of people flowers in the process of waiting, it's their huge sexual desire. It is so huge that it can be compared to the level of sexual desire in women during ovulation, when they sometimes simply cannot control it, and they can go to all lengths in order to get what they need. For example, they can have casual sex or sex with partners who are not very suitable for this. And in this particular sense, men flowers, they're exactly the same during this period, meaning the period when they're sexually twisted, so to speak, when it's as if they didn't have sex for a year or something like that. Also, just like flowers in nature, people flowers, they don't just wait for their pollinators, but they attract them, and they do it in a very persistent, very goal-oriented manner. And the methods that flowers use to attract their pollinators, they're described in great detail in encyclopedias on botany, for example. And of course, you can read about this on your own. But first of all, flowers, they use nectar, color, and smell. And so this means that one of the methods is the amazing aroma emitted by flowers. So it's the floral fragrance that attracts pollinators. And of course, people flowers, they tend to use a wide variety of perfumes and essential oils and so on. And when they want to attract sex partners, they use them quite competently. Also, both men and women flowers, they tend to self-advertise, and they make very thorough, very, so to speak, flowery self-presentations to potential sex partners. In other words, when they want sex, they clean up well. They're dressed perfectly, their hair is freshly cut, it's all done, there's not a hair out of place, their makeup is perfect, and so on. And in general, like a chameleon, a person flower is capable of metamorphosis, actually, and can use any sexual guise depending on the partner. Just like grass that can effectively penetrate where necessary in order to grow. Also, when people flowers are searching for sex partners, they feel as if they're inflated from the inside. Again, just like women during ovulation. They're literally bloated, and it's like they're puffing out in all directions. And if a woman or a man who has the image of a flower in his or her program is going through a period of fading, so to speak, then a completely different feeling emanates from them. The feeling that they don't need sex. What to do in this case? Well, in order to fix the situation, all they need to do is to concentrate their attention on the genitals as flowers ready for pollination. And then the feeling that they don't want sex will disappear like smoke. So in order to bring themselves to a sexually excited state, people flowers should concentrate on their penis or vagina and simply feel how they're starting to swell, ready for sex. So there is no need to fear impotence or frigidity. Nothing like that will ever happen to those people who found out their program from the catalog of human population, and who of course know images by which it is recorded. But anyway, let's get back to people who have a flower as one of the program images. So if they manage to concentrate as much as possible on their genitals and the sexual sensations, if they imagine that their flower is about to stop blooming, that the window is about to close, and if they manage to imagine that this is their last chance to get sex, then they certainly won't need Viagra or anything like it. After all, a flower is the embodiment of sex itself. And as I already mentioned, a flower is a sex organ. And if so, there cannot be any problems related to sexual coldness or anything like that in people with the image of a flower in their individual subtype programs. So, in a nutshell, I told you about what people with the image of a flower are like in the sexual factor. Of course, please share if you recognize some of your partners. As always, don't be shy. There is no need. The chat is open, so please go ahead with questions.